What's ahead? Well, joining us for this Easter spectacular is Lauren Belcross, former Labour advisor, and Adam Stott, who is an entrepreneur and business coach. Good morning, happy Easter.
Good morning.
How are you both?
Fabulous.
Oh, good. Great.
Yeah, good answer.
Good answer. And also, I love the colours, bright, colourful Easter.
I thought I'd make the effort for today, David.
I've never seen you so dressed down, actually.
I know, look, he's getting ready for the army.
Oh, you've got your beard ready. Right, let's talk about the election. Lots of people are talking about when this election is. I actually had a lot of messages coming in yesterday about this, and Rishi Sunak, there's a lot to unpick here. But the front page of the Telegraph this morning, I just think is really interesting. I have constantly said immigration is going to be number one in this election because everything comes off that. But the big plan from the Conservatives, as we know, they haven't got immigration under control. We're now at, what, 4,644, I think, this year. Why?
Don't say that, just look at last year.
Yes, exactly. So we already have that number coming to this country, even though the illegal migration bill has gone through, and all these people are stuck in a state of limbo. We're waiting for the safety of Rwanda bill. But this is the Tory plan. So, and there might be some merit in it. The migrant nationalities with the highest rates of crime will be revealed in league tables under plans to be considered by ministers. Now, the proposal, which is backed by senior Tory MPs, would require the crime rates of each nation's migrants in England and Wales to be published annually, and then ministers have to present a report to Parliament each year detailing the nationality, visa status and asylum status of every offender convicted in England and Welsh courts in the previous 12 months. Now, such a move would mirror an approach by some US states and Denmark, and what they found in Denmark was the crime rates of those from Kuwait, Tunisia, Lebanon and Somalia are far higher than those of Danish nationals. This would come in an amendment to the government's criminal justice bill. Lauren, as a former advisor, it seems to me this doesn't really, whilst I understand the data is important, does this really tackle the issue, which is I think we already know where the trouble is coming from. If you are an illegal in this country, you need to be deported. Isn't that the issue?
I think this has the potential to be one of these issues where, as with so many of the government's approaches to migration, they are chasing the headline, not the detail. It's all well and good, so as you say, Denmark do this. I can be sympathetic to government and say, actually, we've seen previously there was an issue with Albania. Indeed. And Albanians committing crime in this country. We've then signed an agreement with Albania to address this specific issue. If that can be replicated with other nationalities, then fair enough. Let's, potentially worth exploring. But I don't have the confidence in this government's ability to do it because, as with the Rwanda plan, which, let's be honest, none of us think that any single plane is going to take off taking any single person to Rwanda.
Doesn't mean we don't want there to be a plane taking off.
But I think it's... I prefer Keir Starmer and the Labour Party's plans to deal with this.
But what exactly are those?
Of tackling the gangs at source. Come
on.
David,
Everyone
I'm sorry.
Says that.
No, but I think there is a better approach of taking a slightly more boring, slightly more detailed issue as opposed to chasing headlines that aren't going to get you anywhere and then are only going to get you disappointment because, as we see, we've been discussing this issue for, 2 years now and not a single plane takeoff.
Okay.
And no one thinks a plane's going to take off.
Do you think that will be as successful as tackling the drug gangs?
I think there's more scope for it and I think there's more willingness to cooperate.
Okay.
Exactly, and I think we should be.
Let me just ask Adam here. This is clearly a pressing issue for people sitting at home, but actually, to be fair to the government, they have tried lots of things. £150 million into the Frontex thing, £500 million they've spent here, there and everywhere helping France and so on. So they are trying.
And I think this plan isn't a bad plan because I think what's monitored and what is measured is easier to improve. And basically what we're saying is we're not monitoring, we're not measuring. They're saying they've got the information, but they're keeping the information to themselves. I think actually making this information public, I think that if they were to monitor and measure it, we can actually start to control it better. And I think it is a good step in the right direction. It's worked in Denmark, worked in some states in America. So I think it's actually a really positive step forward. My only concern would be, to add to that, is then how are the actions taken after we get the data? So get the data, take the actions.
And where do you stand on the safety of Rwanda bill? Because obviously we're now at an impasse. It's the Easter break, and I think the members of Parliament are sitting there and scheming and plotting. And I also wonder, actually, this was put forward by Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister. How much of this is... And I take your point about the front page. How much of this is also ministers on manoeuvre? Because I think they can sense Rishi Sunak is a very weak leader indeed.
Well, I think that there is obviously, there's struggles. But I think the fact of the matter is when you put a plan in place, you've got to see the plan through. You've got to take the actions to get it done. And I think that that is what they're doing. And we say he's a weak leader, but he is still pushing through. He sets out his agenda. And he then pushes through to get the agenda finished. And when you talk about, we're going to stop the gangs, there is no plan. It's always no plan. With Labour, there is no plan. There is no detail how we're going to move towards this.
It is very easy to say, Lauren, isn't it?
Just hearsay.
I'm going to talk to people, I'm going to stop the gangs.
Because he's in opposition. He doesn't have the power to make those decisions. He's sketching out his plans of what he wants to do, and it's all well and good to say, well, he's got a plan, he's pushing for it, but he's not delivered on it. And there's been so many years of headline chasing.
Let me just ask you about that, because it is something that comes up constantly about Keir Starmer, because obviously the poll lead is extraordinary, whether you can read into the polls. And of course you've got John Curtis saying there's a 99% chance of Labour getting it. I said earlier on, Labour actually, what they have to do tactically, and you know more than me, but they have to actually do nothing, or at least not commit any big, massive muck-ups. Well, they need to do nothing at the moment, and let the Conservatives make all the mistakes. However, I just wonder, as this comes nearer to the election, when does Labour, and you will know this as a former advisor, when does Labour have to be up front with the public and say, right, this is our manifesto, these are our commitments, and this is what we will deliver for the British people?
What I will say is I think there's no... even though John Curtis says 99% of the poll, 99% certainty that Labour will win the next election, I think nobody in Keir Starmer's office, especially Keir Starmer, is going to take that for granted in any moment. I think everyone remembers, it's burned into their consciousness, Kinnock in 92, of everyone assuming and asserting that he would win and John Major winning. So I think everyone has got that fear and the lack of complacency and wants to be delivering the election without sort of assuming it's in the bag. On the questions of substance and when it's their plans, I think that you're starting to see that. You had the issue with 28 billion and it took a while for them to make a decision on it, but they said, and were open and honest, and said, look, there isn't the money to do what we wanted to do, our Great Ambitions plan. We'd rather be honest and open with you and say, look, we can't do this, we're going to have to reduce this figure.
Or did they read the people who don't want to?
I think they're always trying to read the people. The only plans that they have come out with any detail, the plans are horrendous, like the employment plan, what they plan to destroy business owners, basically by giving massive amounts of power. There's some detail
around that,
and it looks dangerous, right, for a business owner.
So just in terms, Adam, where we are, you seem to be sticking up for Rishi Sunak. Look, it's a pretty miserable job right now. But there is, and you've got Halfon, haven't you, and you've got other MPs all standing down, and we're now at 63, I think. Which is,
to illustrate that is 1 in 5 almost of all current sitting Conservative MPs.
Indeed.
That's huge.
We're still not at 97 when there were 75, but we're not far off that. But Halfon's resignation letter was really interesting. He was a staunch loyalist of Sunak and well-liked minister. He then turned to Lord of the Rings for inspiration when he announced he was standing down, which I found very odd. He said he was reminded of the words of the wizard Gandalf after the hobbits had defeated evil and were returning home. I'm not coming to the Shire, my time is over, and as for you, my dear friends, you will need no help. Among the great you are, I no longer fear at all for any of you. Now, it is interesting that the MPs are reading the runes, I think, here. And many people are saying, look, Rishi Sunak is going to face obliteration, particularly depending on what happens in the local elections on the 2nd of May. What do you think is about to unravel?
I think that, he's under massive pressure. I think that it's clear he's losing. But things do change fast, and you never know what's going to happen in the political landscape. There's a lot of things going on in the world. For example, things like, looming war and issues like that. And all Labour seem to care about is things like employee health and not actually defence and different things like that. So who knows what is going to happen at this stage?
Well, you say that, but let me just throw this back to you. These are the latest polls. When you look at Labour, they are more trusted now on the economy, cutting taxes for working people, on stopping...
Do you know why they're more trusted, though? They're more trusted because all the amount of criticism that's been thrown, and I think it's historic as well. It's not just Rishi Sunak. He's inherited a very difficult, party to try and bring together and manage. and the confidence has been lost over many years, not actually in the role that he's doing. I think he has had a bit of an unfair shake.
But no one
forced
forced him to take the job of Prime Minister. He volunteered himself to it, and he was enthusiastic about it. I don't think.
Well, I think he did more than that. I think there was a lot of backstabbing going on as well. But also, Lauren, just in terms of those 5 points that he set out, he has hoisted himself by his own petard. He set out 5 things. You judge me by these 5 things. Well, you didn't do them, did
People
you?
will.
Yeah.
I think I like that Halfon used quotes from Lord of the Rings in his resignation.
you?
It really endeared him to me. I also think he's a very big loss for Sunak. He's the sort of minister who doesn't seek the limelight and gets on with the job, and is a very, from a Labour point of view, I can say he's actually a very good minister and has tried to do his best in his brief. I think I was in Parliament at the time of Theresa May and the sort of grimness there, and even to the point where in the European elections in 2019, they were on single digits. I think they got around 8 or 9% of the vote when the Brexit Party then won the vote in that election.
I may remember.
And but I think the mood now among the Conservatives is worse than it was then, because even then there was a mood of, OK, well, we can do something to change. There is something we can do. I feel so many of them, as the 1 in 5 who are now quitting, they feel they are out of road, and they feel that some of them, I think some of them even genuinely believe that they deserve to lose the next election because of their failures.
I think the mood is very sombre indeed. There are 2,600 English council seats up for grabs. So the question is, let's say the Tories are obliterated in the local elections. Rishi Sunak has 2 options, doesn't he, really? Does he say, right, my time is up, or does he push the nuclear button and go to the country?
I don't think that he's going to say his time's up. I think he's going to keep pushing on, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think
what happens if there are then 53 letters of no confidence?
I think he'll go to a general election. I think he will, because what I think is that this Conservative Party has continually not had leadership and backbiting and issues and all this different stuff going on. And I think Rishi Sunak will see it out, and I think he will push on. Whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing, you need a leader. You need a leader that's going to stand up to criticism.
They're not
he's
a
not doing that.
Conservative leader.
Yeah.
But Renee, what would you do if you were Sunak? If you had the letters of no confidence in, and then you have to resign, or you go to the country, what would you do?
I think he's going to go to the country.
Yeah.
I think that's what he will do.
The problem you then have is you've got quite a lot of Conservative MPs who are likely to lose their job.
Yes.
Wanting the payday for an extra few months.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the local elections, I think London, pre the Uxbridge by-election, there was talk of, maybe we can still salvage London because of Sadiq's unpopularity. I think the 2 big markers for this set of local elections are going to be West Midlands, Andy Street.
Yeah.
If they lose that, Andy Street has done a very job in maintaining what is traditionally a Labour area and turning that blue. If they lose that, they are in serious trouble, and I think the pressure on Sunak to quit will be huge.
I agree totally. Interestingly, all the Conservative advisors are ditching Rishi Sunak. They're going to Starmer and starting to brief Starmer as well. And they can obviously, or at least they believe they know where the money will be. You've got people like Marina Wheeler, Boris Johnson's former wife, the leading barrister. She's giving advice to Sir Keir Starmer's party. You've got Mark Carney, well, then no surprise there. Lord Cooper, Tom Fletcher also giving advice to Starmer. Just before the break, and I have to give you a right of reply, is there any way that Sunak can turn this around, or is he personally toast?
I think he's going to really struggle to turn it around. I think that is obvious, but I think he's going to carry on and do his very best in his leadership efforts.
You should be a politician.
Yeah. No. The reality is, what he might need is a small miracle, something to happen in the landscape.
Miracle?
Well, who knows what that small miracle could be? But he might need something that can really swing confidence.
What is the one
way.
thing he needs? So just that final point. What could save him? Is there something?
Do you know
So,
what
for
I will
example,
say?
is there a Thatcher moment?
Do
Is
you
there a
know what I
Falklands War?
think is also communicating to groups of people is an important thing, and I do think
Too late.
Perhaps is too late, but I do think that for the Labour government for business owners is a dangerous thing. I do, and I think that being highlighted, more business owners should really look
but
to.
more and more
to
business owners are now going to Labour.
No,
Okay.
big business. Not
Okay,
small.
so let's pause.
small business
Right,
owners.
okay, well,
I'm talking small business
all right, let's pick
owners,
this
yeah.
up
I think it's
after
a
the break.
combination.
I want to pick this up because it's a really important point that you
It's
mentioned here.
5.6 million, yeah.
Do people have the right to switch off from work? And I'm going to ask that question after this break. Stay exactly where you are. This is Talk TV. Welcome back to Weekend Breakfast, time 8:48. Very quickly, lots of you getting in contact, and I just want to read out some of these messages. Anne says, David, I think Rishi will be relying on another manufactured war. David Mitch says, this is to your point, Lauren, Keir Starmer will have no more success in smashing international people trafficking gangs than the governments and law enforcement agencies around the world have had in smashing international drug trafficking gangs. The lucrative trade will only end when the pull factor is removed by commitment in this country. So essentially, I'm paraphrasing. Doctors, says Jenny, why do all Labour MPs and supporters talk in word salad? And that's to you. We want detail. This is Jenny, we want detailed policies from Labour, not word salad. Well said, Jenny, well said.
And Ron says Labour were in power for 13 years. I can't remember them stopping the drug gangs because there was always a market. There's only one way to stop the gangs, turn back the boats.
I will say there was different levels of scale, and actually they did, when there was the issue of people coming over on the tunnels and on backs of lorries, it was dealt with a lot more successfully than the current boat issue was.
Okay, all right. I'll let you get away with that.
We weren't seeing the same numbers now that we were under Labour.
So let's say we are preparing for a Labour government, okay? And many people, I've just got one here actually. We are just buying a home in Spain as we prepare for 5 years of accelerated decline under Labour. Labour's front bench leadership wouldn't get a job on the board of any business. Most of them didn't have any real jobs before they became MPs. It's time to plan a future outside this country.
Isn't Spain a socialist-led country? It's an interesting choice of...
Actually, Spain is only a socialist-led country because the people voted for a right-wing government and they all got together to make sure that they couldn't take power.
Well, there you are. But also, Spain has a very interesting history anyway.
It does.
Because I remember when he was under Franco as well. So Labour, Adam, you mentioned this, and I think it's a really important point. Labour has softened key policies in its overhaul of workers' rights in response to business fears about the cost impact of their plans. Now, you mentioned this. He's planning the most extensive overhaul of workers' rights in a generation, including cracking down on zero-hours contracts and giving employees enhanced protections from day one in a job. As Renee says, businesses have expressed fears the measures will raise costs, increase pressure and hamper the economic recovery. Now, one of the things that caught my eye this morning is this right to disconnect, through which employees would have been entitled not to be contacted by their bosses outside their working hours. Workers, they say, will have a new right to disconnect from work outside working hours and not be contacted by their employer outside working hours. As a businessman and an entrepreneur, what do you make of that?
Well, the whole thing, I think, is dangerous and worrying. I think when you zone in and focus on specific policies that can help, where does this become a priority? I don't understand how this is a priority of the Labour government. I think we're already in a society where people are being encouraged, and the working mentality, the work ethic has been declining. It's declined massively since COVID. People with the working from home, now people apply for jobs. When they apply for jobs, they say, do I have to come in? Can I work from home? Like, we've already got all of this stuff going on. It's madness. It is literally madness for an employer that when we now go to recruit and we are building a business, people go, do you want me there? Yeah, I do want it. And I do want more money, but no, I don't want to come in. Like, you have got some mental stuff going on. And then Labour come in and go, also give them the right to disconnect, or give them this and give them that. It is absolute madness.
When Labour first came in, most recently in
But
97.
why is this an area of concern?
Let him answer.
Yeah.
All businesses said, oh, these crazy ideas like the minimum wage are going to ruin businesses. It's going to be so terrible. Now, it's a right. It's accepted, and it didn't ruin business.
But I tell you what, minimum wage and the increasing of minimum wage is putting pressure on businesses. Businesses are struggling. I train thousands of businesses, and there are business owners that are concerned about employing people. The minimum wage is skyrocketing, which then is going to affect people's pricing, which is
Let's just go back to the right to disconnect.
What I think about this is I don't feel so strongly about the right to disconnect, because I do think people have a right to their own life and to not be harassed outside of work. But that does depend on them actually going to work and doing the job that they're meant to do.
I kind of agree with Renee on this, because I think it's about creating a happy medium. I'm sort of personally of the view that I like being in the office, and I think especially for more junior colleagues, the way COVID and the way we've shifted to a lot of areas just being digitally in these kind of meetings, it takes a huge amount of strain, because what would become a 2-minute chat of, oh, can you just show me how to do that in the computer? Oh yeah, come here, I'll show you how it's done. Is now, oh, let me schedule in a Zoom meeting with you so I can show you how to do this.
So
no one wants that.
Right,
but hang on. Yeah. In terms of the right to disconnect, I think there has to be a medium with that, because in previous generations, you didn't have the technology of a boss WhatsApping you. You used to have landlines, and it would be a very rare thing for a boss to call your home on a landline. It'd have to be a real emergency. So it's about reapplying that. And I think, this is something that's been tried and tested in a lot of other European countries like Ireland, where there's a kind of reasonableness of saying, look, I might not get back to you because I'm off and I'm entitled to my time off. And I think it's finding that happy medium where some businesses
it's
can't
an employee
exploit
market, though. Let me tell you, it's an employee market, and if you are a mad boss that is mentally going after your people outside of hours, they ain't going to work for you anyway. That's the reality. But if you need a little bit of just information that is critical to a small business in a moment. When you have a small business, you have 10 people running a business, each person retains information that is critical to the running of that business. If that person is uncontactable, it creates a massive strain on a small business. So I think that if you put a rule in that says that you can't do that, then that's a real issue for a business owner. But I think business owners generally should be respectful of their employees' time and build a good culture.
I agree with that.
Yes, and I think, David, what this risks doing, Labour's plans, actually risks taking us to the same kind of employment scenario that France have. And basically in France, you can never fire anyone. It doesn't matter how useless they are. It's jobs for life. What that does is it gets rid of a meritocracy because people don't need to try. No, exactly. And actually that's terrifying.
But isn't France a stronger economy than ours?
I'll have to check that.
Yeah,
I think it is just, but I think it is. But
I was going to say we're pretty much on parity, in fact.
But I think it's.
But you can't put that down to one thing.
You can't put that down to one thing.
But hang on a minute, there's the point. So particularly, I'm freelance, right? So everyone contacts me the whole time.
Yeah.
So, and I've run a small business, and I totally agree with what you say. But actually, this doesn't necessarily need legislation, does it? It needs respect.
I think where there are very good business owners and people that do take those into account, that's fine. You probably don't need it, but there will always be people who exploit.
But I think the employee will vote with their feet.
Okay, right? but Lauren, is this not like risk in the world? You know, we're trying now to legislate for everything and take risk out of everybody's life.
I think there has to be, but there has to be, especially when it comes to an important area like employment, there has to be basic levels of protection. And where bosses are seen to not provide
basic levels of protection,
but there isn't. When people,
there's huge amounts of protection, and they want to increase. And Labour want to focus on this area.
Yes, the Party of Workers wants to focus on workers' rights.
Already running a business, it is difficult enough when you're bringing employees in. There's a lot of small business owners that are terrified to employ people, which then stops the economy growing, and putting more of these rules in place just makes you suffer more.
Terrified to employ young women?
Yeah,
okay.
Totally.
I'm going to pause it there. I just want to ask you very quickly on the back of Jonathan Ross revealing he sometimes showers less than once a week. How often should anyone shower? I read this. Apparently Jonathan Ross doesn't shower. He actually showers less than once a week. His wife Jane Goldman, the scriptwriter, also goes for days without showering. He went for 2 weeks without washing in the US because, wait for this, Renee, he'd been in a swimming pool. How often should you shower?
I think that's someone's personal choice. I shower twice a day is what I shower, but it's up to what people
especially if you're in London and you sort of go in and come back and don't want the tube in your bedsheets. No, you've got to shower.
We're agreement on this anyway, right?
Shower or wash every day. I don't think it has to be either. I think twice a day I think is silly.
Twice a day moisturiser is my view.
Right, on that note, thank you very much, you clean bunch. That was today's Head to Head.
Head to Head.